My name is Lucy. I'm 32 years old and live in Washington State, working as a senior financial manager at an insurance company. For the past 3 years, I've cut my personal spending to the bare minimum. I didn't buy new clothes, didn't go on vacation, didn't eat out, and lived in a studio apartment barely bigger than a garage. All for one dream: to own a lakeside cabin. I found it on an April morning, with mist still rising over Lake Chelan like a thin silver veil. The oak cabin sat nestled in a pine forest, facing the water, its charcoal-colored roof glowing under the early sunlight. I stood on the porch, took a deep breath, and knew this place was mine. I didn't buy the cabin just for myself. I imagined summer nights around a campfire, the whole family roasting marshmallows, chilly Christmas mornings by the fireplace, long holidays where my parents, younger brother, and sister-in-law would leave the city behind and rediscover the connection that had been smothered by work, stress, and distance. And I believed somehow that this place could make that happen. I placed a deposit that same week, and after 2 months of wrestling with paperwork, the cabin was officially under my name. I'd paid 40% up front. The rest was a 15-year mortgage. I'd never signed anything that made my hands shake so much, but my heart was pounding from excitement, not fear. During the first week after I moved in the essentials, I invited the whole family to spend the weekend. My mother, Denise, age 60, a retired teacher, stepped inside and gasped softly. "Oh my God, Lucy, you really did it." She gently ran her fingers along the wooden railing, her eyes lifting to the tall ceiling and the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the lake. "This place is like a dream." My father, Robert, age 64, a former military officer, just nodded, holding his usual black coffee. He was never the expressive type, but I caught a moment where he stood quietly on the deck, gazing out at the mirror-like lake. My younger brother, Josh, 28, a digital content creator, bounded up the wooden stairs like an excited 8-year-old. "OMG, Lucy, this place is absolutely perfect on camera. Natural lighting, forest backdrop, lake view. This is gonna be the best vlog setup ever." I smiled. In my mind, I could already see the family playing board games by the fire, grilling BBQ on the deck as the sunset painted the water red. This cabin wasn't just property. It was a chance. A chance to heal the cracks in our relationships that time had worn thin. My mom touched my shoulder, her eyes glistening. "But how did you afford this? This place can't be cheap." Every bonus over 3 years, every overtime shift each quarter, no spending beyond essentials. I planned everything down to the dollar. I couldn't hide the pride as I looked around the space I had built. Every wooden beam, every floor tile was the result of sleepless nights and grinding hours at the office. She nodded, though her eyes flickered with something unreadable. My dad said nothing, sipping his coffee as he stepped back out onto the deck, as if avoiding the emotional moment. Josh had already pulled out his camera, filming a test clip for TikTok, calling it our new slice of paradise. I sat down on the armchair near the fireplace, closed my eyes, and breathed in deeply. What I felt was a mixture of relief and hope. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally reached a dream I had chased my entire adult life. A part of me believed that from this point on, everything would change, and I was ready to begin again, with my family beside me. At the end of June, I decided to return to the cabin after 2 intense weeks, buried in a quarterly finance project. The moment I arrived, something felt off. Out on the porch were 2 brand new wicker chairs I had never purchased, along with a doormat that read, "Welcome to the lake vibe," definitely not my style. The back door was unlocked, and the hardwood floor still showed streaks of wet footprints. I stepped inside with a sinking feeling. The kitchen was unusually tidy. The fridge was stocked with organic groceries and a few bottles of detox water labeled Kayla. I froze in place when I saw a new photo frame on the fireplace mantel. A picture of my mother, Denise, grinning alongside Josh and an unfamiliar blonde woman, all standing in front of the cabin. The caption read, "The Wagner family at Lake Chelan. A warm start to summer." I called my mother right then. She answered after a few rings, sounding cheerful. "Oh, hi, sweetheart. I guess you've made it up to the cabin." "Mom, who's been using my house? Someone redecorated, stocked the fridge, placed family photos? It's clear they've been living here all week." "Oh, that was just me and Josh. And his new girlfriend, Kayla. She's adorable. I had a key, remember?" I thought, well, it's kind of the whole family's place, right? I swallowed hard before replying. "Mom, this property is under my name. I pay the mortgage every month. You need to ask before coming here." "Don't overreact. We're family. I just thought we should make use of it instead of leaving it empty." I clenched the phone tighter. "Next time, please ask." All right, I get it," she said. But there wasn't the slightest trace of remorse in her voice. The following week, I stumbled upon a video Kayla posted on Instagram. She was live streaming from the master bedroom in my cabin, using the hashtag #LakeHouseDiaries, showing off her chill morning vibes at my boyfriend's private retreat. I nearly threw my phone across the room. But it didn't stop there. In early July, I got an email from a construction contractor, confirming a deposit of $3,200 on behalf of Mrs. Denise Wagner, for approved front exterior renovations to the cabin. I almost blacked out. I called my mother, and this time, my voice wasn't calm. "What are you doing? Why are you hiring contractors to alter the front of the cabin without asking me?" "Lucy, relax. The front looks too outdated. Guests might think you're being cheap. I just wanted to help upgrade the place. By using your name to authorize changes to my house? I'm doing this for the family. Don't act like some selfish little girl." I was speechless. For years, I had been the quiet child. Never a burden, never a complaint. Always the adult in every argument. But this time? I'd had enough. When I told her to cancel the project, she snapped. "You should be grateful I even care about that house. You live in Seattle all day. Letting the cabin sit empty is a waste." Later, my dad Robert sent me a single message: "Don't upset your mother." No questions asked. No effort to understand. That was it. At the end of the month, I drove up to the cabin unannounced. What I saw made my stomach drop. There were string lights and a small stage set up in the backyard. Kayla was filming a TikTok with a group of strangers. She saw me and offered a sheepish smile. "Oh, hey, Lucy. We didn't think you were coming today. Josh said you were busy?" "Josh said?" I stepped up onto the porch. "This is my house. No one has the right to turn it into their personal studio." Kayla rolled her eyes and looked toward the interior. "Maybe you should talk to your mom. Everyone thinks this is sort of the home base for the family project." I felt like someone had torn straight through the vision I had built around this cabin. What was meant to be a place for bonding had been turned into a tool for fake status. A space where every decision was made by people who hadn't contributed a single cent. I walked inside. The hardwood floor was scratched. The sofa I had bought was stained with red wine. My home office had been transformed into a podcast recording corner, complete with a mic and LED lights. Josh wasn't there, but he left a note on the fridge. "Don't be mad. Got a big shoot next week. Love ya." I shut the door. Standing there, in what used to be my dream come true, I realized one thing. I'd been too soft. And maybe it was time to stop being soft. One Friday afternoon at the end of July, I decided to drive up to the cabin without warning. That entire week I hadn't been able to sleep. The thought of strangers walking through my bedroom, opening my fridge, sitting on the sofa I paid for, made my stomach twist. I arrived just before 6 p.m. The sun was still out, but the atmosphere around the cabin felt unusually chaotic. 2 SUVs were parked along the curb, completely blocking the entrance. I recognized one as Josh's. The other was unfamiliar. EDM music was thumping from the backyard, mixed with loud laughter and voices. I stepped onto the front steps, pulled out my key, and tried the lock like I always did. But this time, the key didn't fit. I tried again. Nothing. The lock had been changed. My heart started pounding. I checked the side door. Also locked. The back door had a newly installed electronic keypad, blinking cold blue when I touched it. I stood frozen, fists clenched white. They had really changed the locks. I called my mother. No answer. I called Josh. Nothing. I tried Kayla. Her phone was off. Finally, I called my mom again. She picked up after 3 rings, her voice mingled with thumping music. Lucy, what's going on? I'm a little busy. Did you change the locks at the cabin? I asked directly, trying to keep calm. Oh, yeah, the old one jammed. Josh had someone fix it. Is that a problem? A problem? I nearly hissed through my teeth. You're in my house, throwing a party, changed the locks without telling me, and you're asking if that's a problem? Lucy. Don't be dramatic. Tonight's Josh and Kayla's launch party. All their media partners are here. You're always too busy to use the cabin anyway. I figured you didn't care. I looked up at the sky, trying to steady myself. I bought this cabin for family, not for you to hijack and turn into a performance stage. Don't say it like that. Sounds so harsh, she cut in. We'll talk later, all right? I really need to get back to the guests. I hope you understand. The call ended abruptly. I stood there, in front of my own front door, surrounded by the noise of people who had no idea, or simply didn't care, that they were partying on someone else's property. I turned to head back to my car and froze when I noticed an older woman watching me from the porch next door. She wore a cardigan, held a teacup, and looked at me with genuine concern. I nodded politely and started to walk away when she spoke. You're Lucy, right? I stopped. Yes, and you are? I'm Evelyn. I've lived next door for over 30 years. I've seen you around before. You're the new owner of that cabin, aren't you? I nodded, bitterness welling up in my chest. Yes. Though right now, I'm not sure if I even count as the owner anymore. Evelyn stepped down a few stairs, her voice lowering. They've been throwing parties every week. New people show up every couple of days. I asked Kayla once, and she told me the cabin was a family co-investment and was being developed into a content production site. It didn't sit right with me, and seeing you now, I knew something wasn't adding up. I took a deep breath. Would you be willing to document what you've seen? Anything, even small details, would help. Absolutely. And I have security cameras. They record the driveway and part of the backyard. If you need footage, I can pull it. I squeezed her hand gently. I really appreciate that. As I turned to leave, a flashy sports car pulled up. A group of young people in loud outfits jumped out, carrying a Bluetooth speaker and a few cases of beer. One of them shouted toward the house. Party time, baby! Kayla said just use the back door. The door opened, music blasting louder. Through the glass I saw my mother, laughing with a silver-haired man in a silk shirt. Josh was live streaming, filming the crowd by the fireplace, the same fireplace I once pictured our family gathered around for game night. I didn't walk up to knock. Instead, I pulled out my phone. My hand trembled slightly, not out of fear but because, for the first time, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I called my lawyer. And this time I wasn't asking for advice. I was giving instructions. The next morning, I returned to Evelyn's house with a notebook and a portable hard drive in my bag. She opened the door and welcomed me into her living room, filled with sunlight and the scent of chamomile tea. Her computer was already on, the screen displaying frame-by-frame footage pulled from the security camera mounted on her porch. She didn't say much, just quietly clicked through each segment, noting timestamps like someone who'd done this more times than she should have, had to. Here, she pointed to footage from July 5th. They showed up at 9:17 a.m. A truck dropped off construction materials. Your mother was giving directions, and that Josh boy was signing papers with the contractors. I watched it clearly. My mother's neatly tied gray hair, clipboard in hand, constantly on the phone. A few seconds later, Evelyn fast forward. July 10th, evening party. Guests started arriving around 4 p.m. and the last car pulled out just before midnight. I counted at least 26 people going in and out. I pulled out my pen and scribbled the details into my notebook. Could you send me all footage with them on it? Ideally from mid-June until now. Of course. She plugged the hard drive in and began transferring files. I just think it's so wrong, what they're doing to you. You bought this cabin, poured your hopes into it, and they trampled all over it. That's cruel. I nodded. Thank you, this means more than you know. On my way back, I stopped by a small coffee shop in the center of town. I opened my laptop and created a folder named Evidence, Wagner Cabin. Alongside the video footage from Evelyn's cameras, I started collecting everything else I could use. Screenshots of Kayla's Instagram posts, TikToks Josh recorded in my living room, and live streams of my mother presenting the cabin as our family's shared lakeside retreat. I replayed one clip from Josh's video. Welcome to Wagner Retreat. This is our family lake house, where we gather, create content, relax, and invest in dreams. Next to him, my mother beamed and raised a wine glass. Every corner here bears our family's mark. Every detail, from design to renovation, was planned together. I paused the video. Their mark? They hadn't spent a single dollar on this place. I opened my banking app and downloaded the entire mortgage history. 3 years of saving, 6 months of payments. All me. Not once had any of them sent a single transfer. That night, I called an old acquaintance. Brandon Keller, a civil attorney who once represented me in a labor dispute with my former employer. I didn't sugarcoat anything. Brandon? I need a full legal response, prepared for unlawful occupation, fraudulent property claims, and if possible, trespassing. He was silent for a moment. Lucy? This is the cabin you once said you bought to bring your family together, right? Yes. But they changed the locks, held commercial events there, and repeatedly claimed the cabin was shared property. I've got footage, images, a witness, and financial records. I want to handle this the right way. But I'm not playing nice anymore. I understand. Send me everything tonight. I'll review and build a plan. I'll need the deed, mortgage statements, and every piece of evidence you've gathered. The more the better. I sent it all before midnight, Brandon replied quickly. This is solid enough to file for emergency eviction or take them to court. But Lucy, I need to ask. How far are you willing to go? I stared at the screen, thinking about my mother, toasting on camera, Josh, filming from what used to be my workspace, Kayla referring to the cabin as her brand sanctuary. I thought about the cold beep of the digital lock on a door that used to be mine. I typed slowly. I want back what's mine. And I want them to never forget it. The next day, Brandon sent me a 3-phase plan. File an unlawful occupancy claim, issue a formal legal notice to my family about property violations, and, in parallel, prepare for a potential sale of the cabin to cut myself free from their toxic control, once and for all. At the bottom of his email was one line that hit like a switch. If you're ready, we can coordinate with law enforcement to repossess the property while they're still inside. The only question left is, are you ready? I closed the laptop. The sunset cast a golden glow across the printed documents I had spread out. The answer couldn't have been clearer. I was ready. On Monday morning, I received a call from the bank. The representative, calm but clearly tense, enunciated every word carefully. We're calling to confirm that Miss Lucy Wagner is authorizing the transfer of property at 42 Shorepine Lane into an entity called Wagner Living Group, LLC, registered under Ms. Denise Wagner. Is that correct? I barely heard the rest. My ears rang. My hand gripped the phone so tightly it hurt, and I fought to stay composed instead of screaming. No, I have never signed any documents related to that. The cabin is in my name, individually. No third party has power of attorney. The representative cleared his throat. Thank you for confirming. We'll place an immediate hold on the transfer request. And, just so you're aware, a complete file was submitted, including a digital signature under your name and a copy of your ID. We suspect possible forgery. I hung up with my heart pounding. There was no doubt in my mind who was behind this. 10 minutes later, I was at Brandon's office, dropping a flash drive with the bank files onto his desk. They're not just occupying my house, I said, voice sharp. They're trying to steal it legally by forging my signature. Brandon opened his laptop and pulled up the files. On the screen was the contract. Transferor, Lucy Wagner. Transferee, Wagner Living Group LLC. Represented by Denise Wagner. It even included a scanned copy of my driver's license, and the signature looked uncannily like mine. This signature was pasted in. There's no digital signature log, Brandon concluded. This was photoshopped. I inhaled deeply. So they used my name to transfer the property and then used it as collateral for that fake business? Lake House Studios? Most likely, they're trying to secure a loan using the cabin as leverage. But submitting forged documents, that's criminal. How far do you want to take this? I want them to admit what they've done, and I want legal proof. That afternoon, I emailed my mother with a subject line that read simply, "Request for explanation, Lake Chelan Cabin." The message was one sentence long. I have a copy of the illegal transfer documents. We need to talk, now. No intermediaries. Less than 2 hours later, I got a call. It was my father, Robert. His voice was hoarse and low. Lucy, what are you doing? Your mother's been crying all afternoon. Good. Maybe now she knows a fraction of what I've been feeling. I said coldly. Did you know she forged my signature to transfer the cabin into an LLC? He paused for several seconds. That's a misunderstanding. It was a temporary process to release investment funds. Everything would have gone back to normal. There's nothing temporary about identity theft and mortgaging my home behind my back. My voice was razor sharp. This isn't a family matter. This is fraud. Lucy, everything you have, you owe to this family. Who paid your college tuition? Who bought your first car? And now that it's time to give back, this is what you do? I laughed dryly. I paid off my tuition through student loans. That old Honda? You made me work warehouse shifts every summer to cover it. If you're going to rewrite history, at least remember, I've got a good memory. You're going to regret this, Lucy. You're destroying everything. No, Dad, I said, my voice steady. I'm stopping you all from destroying what I built. With my sweat, and every single dollar I earned. I hung up. My heart raced, but my mind had never been clearer. That night, Brandon sent me a draft of the civil complaint and a cease and desist order against Wagner Living Group LLC. He also included a formal request to initiate an investigation into document forgery and financial fraud. I signed it without hesitation. That night, I sat in the living room of my Seattle apartment, watching highway lights flicker on the window glass. I didn't picture family dinners by the cabin fireplace anymore. All that remained was the truth, and I was ready to use it as a weapon. Brendan advised me, if we want to win in court, Lucy, legal documents alone won't be enough. We need to show real consequences. If you can get evidence of them using the cabin illegally as a business, possibly breaking the law, the court won't side with them. I nodded. A plan had already begun to form in my mind. Clear, calculated, and chilling in its precision. The next day, I contacted a private security firm in Spokane. They specialized in installing discrete surveillance systems linked directly to the owner's phone. I didn't want to forcibly break into the property, so I chose a subtle approach, I hired a technician posing as an HVAC repairman to access the cabin without raising suspicion. Evelyn helped coordinate the perfect time, Wednesday afternoon, when Josh and Kayla were typically out filming, and my mother only visited on weekends. 4 micro cameras were installed in under 2 hours. One in the living room, one in the hallway near the bedrooms, one in the kitchen, and one overlooking the backyard where most of the parties were held. The setup was so discreet that no one would notice unless they were specifically looking. I installed the app on my phone. Every motion would now trigger a real-time notification. 3 days later, the first alert came in at 9:12 p.m. on Saturday. I was sitting in my home office when the screen lit up with an image of Kayla in a glittery dress, directing a group of friends as they set up tables for a party. Josh was dragging speakers out into the yard. My mother was also there, wearing a long evening gown, clinking glasses with a sharply dressed man. I turned on the sound. "This is the official launch of Lake House Collective," Kayla beamed at the livestream camera. "We're transforming this space into a creative retreat for content makers. Huge thanks to Mom Denise for allowing us to use this incredible venue." My mother smiled as if delivering a keynote speech. "Our family always supports the younger generation. This cabin is a hub for creativity and it's a shared asset. Lucy? Well, she's not really interested in this sort of thing." I closed my eyes for a moment. Not interested? What did they think I'd been doing the past 3 years? Working late nights, sacrificing every comfort to pay for every beam and window pane? When I opened them again, the footage had shifted. One girl was sprinkling what looked like white powder across the stone countertop. One of Josh's friends laughed loudly, pouring liquor into plastic cups. I snapped a screenshot and saved the video. That was the evidence. Not just of trespassing, but of potential drug use. That night, I didn't sleep. I re-watched every clip from the past 4 days. My mother giving strangers a house tour, presenting each room like it was hers, Josh signing contracts with a video production crew, Kayla hosting a virtual meeting, pitching the cabin as a high-renter investment property. I compiled everything into one folder and emailed it to Brandon. The subject line was simple: "They've gone too far." The next morning he called, a mix of shock and professional excitement in his voice. "Lucy, this is a gold mine. Not only does it prove unlawful occupation, but it shows clear evidence of illegally commercializing private property. We can file for immediate removal and begin the sale process." I straightened in my seat. "Sale process? You once told me this cabin was your dream. But at this point, holding on to it might just keep you tethered to them." I was quiet for a long while. In my mind, I saw myself standing on the porch that first morning. Sunrise over the lake, hope swelling in my chest. Now, it was no longer a dream. It had become the scene of a sophisticated invasion. "Can you find trustworthy buyers?" I asked. "Yes, and if you approve, we'll list the cabin the same night they're planning to launch Lake House Collective." I didn't smile, I only nodded. "Do it." I opened the security app again. Kayla was rehearsing a speech in front of the mirror. Josh was testing lighting. My mother entered the room holding a thick folder. Probably a funding proposal based on their so-called family asset. I whispered to myself, eyes locked on the screen. It's time they learn what real ownership and truth actually look like. Saturday night, LED lights lined the walkway leading to the cabin. From the camera on my phone, I saw Kayla wearing a shimmering tiara, beaming in the center of a crowd. She raised a glass and streamed live on Instagram. "Welcome to the official launch of Lake House Collective. We're opening our new creative space at the family's lake house." Josh stood beside her in a silver-gray suit, nodding like he was about to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award. My mother was busy serving drinks to a group of middle-aged men, laughing and chatting as if they were investors. I was parked a block away, inside a rented SUV, alongside Brandon and Deputy Joseph Allen. He'd been fully briefed. Legal documents, civil orders, proof of property ownership, all in hand. Brandon glanced at his watch. 8:42, perfect timing, we're right on schedule for their big announcement. I nodded and opened the car door. I wore a simple black dress, hair pulled back low, and carried a thick file folder. No makeup, no jewelry. Just one thing: the truth. We walked straight to the front door. Inside, music pounded through the walls. Through the glass, I saw Josh standing in the living room with a microphone. And finally, thanks to my mom for always believing in me, and to my sister, even though she couldn't be here tonight, for helping in the early stages of the project. I pushed the door open just as the applause erupted. The music cut off. Over 40 heads turned toward me, then to Brandon and the deputy behind me. Josh froze. Kayla went wide-eyed. My mother turned pale and speechless. "Good evening," I said loud and clear. "I'm Lucy Wagner, the sole legal owner of this property, and this event, I'm sorry folks, is officially over." "Lucy!" My mother stepped forward, lowering her voice. "What are you doing? Don't make a scene in front of the guests." "Oh, you care about appearances now? What about my dignity, the one you've all trampled for months?" Josh stepped in, smiling nervously. "Sis, please don't ruin this, we're live streaming." I raised the folder high. "Good, let them all see it." He opened the first page, the deed. "I bought this cabin with my own savings. No one here has any legal right to it." Brandon stepped up, presenting verification papers. Under Washington State Civil Code, any unauthorized occupation and commercial use of private property is subject to immediate enforcement. Deputy Allen added, "Ownership has been confirmed. The property owner demands all activities cease and all attendees vacate immediately." Kayla turned pale but forced a smile. "This is a misunderstanding. She said the cabin was for family." "I said it was to bring the family together, not for you to impersonate ownership, throw parties, shoot content, and forge a transfer to a fake LLC." I opened my phone and played surveillance footage of Kayla sprinkling white powder on my kitchen counter. The room fell silent. "I've submitted everything to my lawyer, including copies of the forged transfer paperwork my mother sent to the bank. I can present all of this to a judge tomorrow." One man in the crowd whispered, "She's saying Denise forged documents?" "Exactly," I said. "And here's one more thing you all should know." I turned to Kayla. "This house has been sold, the transaction finalized this morning. Tonight is your farewell party. Everyone needs to leave." Kayla staggered backward. Josh barked, "You can't do this." "Josh," I said, locking eyes with him. "I already did." My mother's voice cracked. "Lucy, you'll destroy everything just because you're angry? This isn't anger. It's justice." I turned to the deputy. "Proceed." One by one, guests were escorted out. Some filmed the scene, others whispered in disbelief. Kayla fumed. Josh stood speechless. My mother, for the first time, had nothing left to say. I stepped onto the porch as wind swept across the lake. Behind me was the house that once held my dreams. Soon, it would belong to someone else. Brandon stepped beside me and murmured, "They'll never forget this night." I nodded, eyes forward. "And I'll never have to remember them again." 3 days after the eviction, the lake cabin no longer held a trace of the people who once invaded it. The professional cleaning crew Brandon had hired had scrubbed away the wine stains, replaced the rugs, and repaired the cracks on the stone countertop. I stood in the living room, taking one last look around. Everything was back in order. Clean, still, silent. No more shrill live stream voices, no more clinking glasses, no more hollow laughter. The new owners would arrive the next morning, a young couple from Spokane with 2 little kids. They planned to turn the cabin into a weekend getaway. No social media, no streaming. Just a quiet place to breathe. As I reviewed the closing documents, a new email from Brandon's office arrived. The subject line stopped me cold. "Legal records regarding the estate of Rose Martin, your grandmother." I froze. I had no idea Brendan had been looking into anything related to her. In the message he explained he had stumbled across a faint note in an old land record, while verifying the legitimacy of the sale. He'd asked an associate to trace the ownership history back before the year 2000. What he found made me sit down, stunned. The cabin I had scraped and saved for over 3 years to buy had once legally belonged to my grandmother, Rose, my mother Denise's biological mother. After Rose passed away, she left the cabin to me in a private will, one that had never gone through probate. When I was 16, my mother, as the property guardian, quietly sold it far below market value. The buyer? A real estate firm connected to an old colleague of my father's. Brandon's email concluded, "If you'd like, I can file a motion for investigation into estate abuse and civil fraud. There's also a potential case for financial restitution if the sale is found unlawful." I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I printed a copy of my grandmother's will and drove to the small cemetery on the west hill of town. I stood before the gravestone that read, Rose M. Martin, placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums and read her will aloud. To my granddaughter Lucy Wagner. I leave the cabin at Lake Chelan, the only place that ever made me feel whole. The wind picked up. My chest ached, both grief and peace settling in at once. I left the cemetery at sunset. On the drive back, my mother called. For the first time, I didn't decline the call only because I knew it would be the last. "Lucy," her voice was hoarse, "you can't just cut us off like this." "I'm not cutting anyone off, Mom. I'm choosing to stop being manipulated. You're making me lose everything. My reputation, my friends, my family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by action. And you betrayed me. Not just once. I'm sorry." The cabin. The LLC. The loan. It was all for Josh. He needed a shot. And I expected too much from you. I let out a soft laugh. "No, you didn't expect too much. You just expected me to endure everything. You never once asked what I needed. You think selling the cabin means you've won? One day, Lucy, you'll need us. Maybe. But if that day comes, I'll go to someone who truly helps, not someone who sees me as a family asset." I hung up. Then I blocked her number. And Josh's. And Kayla's. I didn't need to hear excuses, sob stories, or empty promises to change. Anyone who wants forgiveness must first know remorse, and none of them had it. The next morning, I handed the keys to the young couple. They hugged me, tearfully grateful, while their kids ran giggling through the backyard. The older one looked up at me, curious. "Did you used to live here?" I smiled. "I did, and now it's your turn to make memories here." On the way back to Seattle, I didn't play music. I didn't overthink. I just drove, mile by mile, leaving behind not just a cabin, but an entire chapter of my life. A chapter filled with pressure, deception, and warped expectations from people who should have loved me unconditionally. I was no longer the Lucy who begged to be heard. I was the Lucy who wrote her own boundaries. And to me, that was the real inheritance my grandmother left behind. Lucy's story is a powerful reminder that sacrifice doesn't guarantee respect, and kindness should never be treated as obligation. When family crosses the line, standing up to protect your dignity and property isn't selfish, it's necessary. In real life, everyone has the right to say enough to manipulation, even when it comes from loved ones. Sometimes, letting go isn't giving up. It's the only way to reclaim peace and ownership over your life. What do you think about Lucy's choice? Would you have done the same in her situation? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life. I'm Ruby Hartman, 30 years old. Every October, the Kingsley family holds its traditional gathering at the old 3-story stone mansion on a hill outside Denver, a place my great-grandfather built back in 1936. And I, the one always mentioned with pity or sarcasm, still show up on time, still wear my old blazer, and still sit alone at the end of the 16-seat dining table. Since I was 14, after a car accident took both my parents, I'd been the appendix of this family. They never said it outright, but their eyes never hid it. Ruby? The poor girl living off other people's kindness. Aunt Lorraine once said in the kitchen, thinking I didn't hear. I stood behind the door, broom in hand, face ice cold. The Kingsleys have been wealthy for generations. They own a chain of luxury hotels scattered across the western U.S., from Arizona to Montana. My grandfather, Walter, built it all by buying roadside motels and turning them into destinations for the rising middle class. After his passing, my grandmother Grace, my father's mother, took over the company with a terrifying coldness. That woman never smiled unless it was about assets. My father, the youngest of four, was the only one who stepped out of the Kingsley Group's shadow. He married my mother, a public library clerk, and moved to a small town called Loveland. They weren't rich, but we were happy. Until that fateful summer. After the funeral, I was sent to live with Grandma Grace at the Kingsley mansion. I still remember that first morning, eating breakfast in the same outfit I'd worn to the funeral, when my cousin Brittany called me a pathetic little souvenir, while flaunting her new $6,000 diamond bracelet, gifted for getting an A in modern dance. I didn't cry. Grandma said I wasn't allowed to cry. Kingsleys aren't weak, she said. We control emotions like we control assets. In the years that followed, she taught me to read financial statements before I even mastered algebra. She showed me investment fund reports before I learned how to pick mascara. I stayed up late studying return rate charts, while my cousins booked facials in Aspen. She never said she loved me, but she taught me to fend for myself. And that meant more than words. In contrast, the rest of the family made no effort to hide their resentment. To them, I was the symbol of my father's strategic marriage failure, choosing a woman with nothing but books and a $3,000 salary. At parties, I was seated next to the server, or Aunt Lorraine's old cat. Meanwhile, they swapped stories about five-star resorts in Sedona, Cousin Jared's Patek Philippe watch collection, or Cousin Lucas being featured in a magazine for buying a $3.4 million penthouse in San Francisco. And me? I drove the old Ford Focus my dad left behind. At every reunion, my car parked between the Range Rovers, Lexuses, and Porsches, like a living reminder that I didn't belong. And each time, I still walked into that stone mansion with a smile, still sat quietly while they talked about stocks, investments, and who's the real pride of this family. I never argued, not because I was weak, but because I was listening and remembering. In their eyes, I was a negative balance. No house, no shares in the company, no Rolex, no golf club lunches. I lived with Grandma Grace for 3 years, long enough to understand that silence has a language of its own. She wasn't the type to hold me close or read bedtime stories, but when I sat quietly outside her study at midnight, I saw her poring over thick investment reports, reading glasses at the tip of her nose, dipping a fountain pen into ink like she was signing a war treaty rather than analyzing profits from a plot of land in Wyoming. One December evening, instead of a birthday gift, she slid a folder across the table toward me. "Read this," she said, eyes still on the Wall Street Journal. "It's this year's quarterly financial report for Kingsley Hospitality. If you don't understand it, don't bother coming to the next board meeting." I had just turned 17. I stayed up for 2 nights straight, looking up every term in the investment dictionary she'd given me. On the day of the meeting, I walked into the boardroom in a simple knit dress beside her, surrounded by executives in bespoke Milan suits. When Uncle Kevin smirked and asked my thoughts on the EBITDA growth rate, I replied with a question. "Can you explain why this year's depreciation schedule was extended by 6 months? I think it's skewing the profit data." The room fell silent. Grandma didn't look at me, just smirked and gave a small nod. From that day on, she began to train me seriously. There were no formal lessons. Each one came as a story, a headline, or a brutally analyzed mistake. "No one gets rich by spending to be noticed," she said once, when I asked why she never wore jewelry aside from Grandpa's plain wedding ring. We had an odd agreement. I worked as her unpaid assistant. I took notes, reviewed lease agreements, even met with contractors for hotel renovations she invested in across Utah. The summer I turned 18, she let me manage a small project, revamping a rundown motel near Grand Junction. I negotiated prices, monitored progress, planned rental pricing. By fall it was booked through February. Post-renovation profits tripled. The night she handed me the final statement, I almost didn't believe my eyes. She had listed me as a 30% owner of the motel and transferred 100% of its first-year profit into an account in my name. I was speechless. "Why me?" I asked. She simply said, "Because you never asked me what you'd get out of it." At 21, Grandma passed away in her sleep. No illness, no drama. Just a winter night. She didn't wake up from. The funeral was quiet. People called her a real estate legend, but no one truly understood what made her different. They remembered her numbers and smart investments, but not how she read people through the way they spent. After the funeral, each grandchild received a sealed envelope. Brittany got $80,000 to launch her cosmetics brand. Jared received $150,000 for his gym expansion project. And me? Just a handwritten note. "Ruby, don't spend this to impress. Use it to quietly gain control." Inside was a check for $75,000. Less than what the others got. But I understood. She wasn't leaving me a large sum. She was leaving me a message. Real power isn't about how much you have, but what you do when others think you have nothing. I dropped out of my MBA program and used the money to buy a dilapidated 2-story house in a neighborhood no one wanted 10 years ago, East Lake, north of Denver. I lived on the first floor, rented out the second. 6 months later, the area got a revitalization project. 3 years after that, I sold that first house for 4 times what I paid. Somehow, I knew she was still watching, and I was certain of one thing. She'd never want me to waste energy demanding fairness with words. She wanted me to do it through shares, contracts, and signatures. At exactly the right time. I left Denver at 23 with an old suitcase, the same laptop I'd used all through college, and an Excel spreadsheet titled 10-Year Plan, packed with formulas. I rented a studio apartment in Spokane, Washington, where home prices were still low and big investors hadn't begun circling yet. While my cousins flaunted Maldives vacations on Instagram, I was combing through foreclosure lists and calling every local bank to track down pre-repossessed assets. I didn't drive a new car. I fixed up my Ford Focus with money I could have used for a new phone. I didn't eat out. I cooked 3 meals a day and learned to fix plumbing through YouTube videos. I didn't post work hard, play hard selfies at co-working spaces or spas. My only profile image was the logo of my shell company, Heartwood Property Group, registered to keep my identity off public property records. The first property I bought was a 3-bedroom house repossessed by the bank. The backyard was waist-high in weeds, the wiring chewed by rats, and the living room reeked of mildew. But the location, right between 2 roads the city had approved for future expansion. I applied for a special renovation loan designed for low-income individuals. Thanks to my carefully maintained modest income records, 10 months later, I sold the house for nearly double. I didn't spend the money on designer bags. I bought a row of 4 units in Spokane Valley, once worker housing for a nearby plant. I lived in one, rented the other 3, and reinvested the profits. Each property was held under a different LLC, all flowing through a holding company registered in Delaware, where privacy laws are notoriously airtight. I began tracking small markets on the rise but not yet saturated: Missoula in Montana, Salem in Oregon, and especially Fort Collins in Colorado. I devoured market reports, learned to read early signals before the crowd caught on. A new light rail line gets funding? I bought near it. A Whole Foods opened? I checked surrounding land prices. A school district got approved for expansion. I bought apartments near the future campus. By year 3, I owned 9 properties. In the 4th year, I bought my first commercial building, an old laundromat I turned into co-working space. I planned it all myself, hired a mid-tier design team, and squeezed every dollar to stay on budget. By year 6, I owned 14 properties, with a combined appraised value of about $30 million. Then came the strangest opportunity. I received an email from a property management firm representing the owner of a building called Maple Ridge in Aurora, south of Denver. It had 28 units, outdated amenities but a perfect location, near a hospital, a high school, and a shopping center. The owner wanted a quick sale before moving out of state. But what caught my eye was the tenant list. 3 names froze me: Jarrett Kingsley, Brittany Ellis, and young Lucas. The same people who once mocked me across Grandma's dining table. Now? They were tenants in a building about to be sold, quietly. I told no one. I didn't react emotionally. Instead, I bought the building through a brand new parent company called Augustine Partners. None of them suspected a thing. I even kept the same management firm to maintain appearances. I made only one change: the tenant approval process. Tighter credit checks, stricter screening, and a new policy memo announcing renovations to the lobby. They started complaining about the drilling, the new guest check-in portal, and the revised parking assignments by resident tier. I listened, through forwarded emails. I read Jared's message saying, "This new owner must be real estate clueless," and Lucas threatening, "I'll find a way to buy the place if conditions don't improve." I didn't respond. I just smiled. The flight from Spokane landed in Denver at 7 p.m. I didn't check any luggage. Just carried a light brown leather tote holding my laptop, printed contracts, and a steel-clipped folder. My real assets weren't in my bag. They were in the silence I'd kept for nearly a decade. The Kingsley estate sat atop Sunset Hill, facing the Rocky Mountains like an old fortress refusing to bow to time. But this time, it faced a real threat. Not from snowstorms or decay, but from the very bloodline that once protected it. This year's family gathering was scheduled to last 3 days. According to an email from Aunt Lorraine, the self-declared internal copay, the main agenda was to optimize legacy assets. Translation: they wanted to sell Grandma's estate for a development project. I arrived early on Friday morning. Martha, the housekeeper who had been there since before I was born, was the only one who welcomed me with a sincere smile. "Miss Ruby," she whispered as she opened the door. If Miss Grace were still alive, she'd never let them lay a hand on this house. I said nothing, just held her hand tightly. I still remembered the last time Grandma sat in the living room, her hand on the oak banister, gazing out at the lavender garden. "This house is not for sale. It's a memory. A reminder," she said before kissing my forehead. That afternoon, as relatives started arriving, the estate turned into a fashion runway. Brittany showed up in a brand new Ralph Lauren jumpsuit, holding a Pomeranian with a Hermes scarf. Jared parked his shiny new Tesla right at the front entrance and nodded at me like I was hotel staff. Lucas came late, carrying a laptop and a pitch deck for his Kingsley redevelopment proposal. "Ruby?" Uncle Alan sneered, giving me a head-to-toe look. "Still driving that old Focus? Durable, I'll give you that." I smiled politely. "Yes, it hasn't betrayed me, unlike some relatives." That evening, the welcome dinner took place in the main dining hall, with white lace tablecloths and Limoges china. I was seated near the end of the table right by the kitchen door. No one said anything directly, but the way Jared bragged about his new hotel chain in Palm Springs, and how Brittany raved about upgrading her Dallas penthouse, with family equity bonuses, all pointed at me. Saturday morning, the official meeting began in the great room, once the heart of Grandma's warm Christmas gatherings. Now the nostalgia was replaced by a giant LED screen showing land maps, 3D renderings of condo blocks, and a profit potential breakdown. Lucas stood up to present. "If we sell this land to Greystone Development for a base price of $42 million plus a profit-sharing clause on the luxury complex, each shareholder would see a 3-fold return within 6 years." His voice echoed like this was a moment in history. I raised my hand. What about the memories, the family legacy? Jared scoffed. You can't live off nostalgia, Ruby. I looked straight at Uncle Alan. Grandma said this house should never be sold. It's the soul of this family. He adjusted his tie. Ruby, you have 2% voting power. No board seat in Kingsley Capital. And no alternative plan. Don't turn this meeting into a sentimental monologue. My hands clenched under the table. Brittany tilted her head, laughing. Come on, let's be real. Ruby doesn't have the money to keep a mansion just for sentiment. They voted immediately after. Of course, only Martha and I didn't raise our hands. Even though Martha didn't own a single share, she looked at me with steady eyes, as if her voice still held more weight than all of theirs. The meeting ended with clinking glasses and plans for lunch the next day at Ridgewood Golf Club. I walked out of the room, without a single head turning. Sunday, the second day of the family meeting, began with a buffet breakfast full of croissants, imported jam, and chilled orange juice. I sat quietly with my black coffee, avoiding the pitying glances of a few relatives. They had decided to sell Grandma's estate. In their eyes, I had failed to stop it. By 10 a.m., everyone gathered in the grand living room for personal presentations, where each member reported their financial achievements from the past year. In reality, it was an unspoken contest for who made the most money, owned the biggest house, drove the most expensive car, and who, of course, still hadn't lived up to Kingsley standards. Uncle Alan went first, boasting about his lakeside hotel deal in Utah. Jared followed with a flashy report on his Phoenix commercial real estate holdings, citing growth figures no one could verify. Brittany presented slides of her new villa in Florida, including photos of a walk-in closet bigger than the apartment I currently rented. She added, "We didn't really make any big investments this year, mostly focused on resting. After all, not everyone needs to work hard to live well." Applause followed each presentation, as if they were witnessing world records. Then it was my turn. "Ruby, do you have anything to share?" Aunt Lorraine asked sweetly. Her voice that kind of artificial sugar-coating a razor blade. I stood calmly. "I don't have a slide deck, just a few personal notes." Some eyes looked up with curiosity. Most didn't bother. Jared rested his chin on his hand. Brittany scrolled her phone. Lucas leaned into his yawning girlfriend. "I still work as an independent financial consultant," I began evenly. "Living in Spokane. Income's modest but steady. Still driving the same old car, still renting." "You should let someone help manage your affairs," Uncle Alan cut in. "The family could establish a support fund for those who haven't reached certain milestones. Nothing to be ashamed of." Before I could reply, Brittany chimed in. "Ruby, if you need a place after the estate is sold, I have a condo sitting empty in Tampa. I could rent it to you at a discount." Laughter slipped out from Jared and Lucas, no effort to hide it now. I looked at them. No anger, no hurt. Just razor-sharp clarity. "I appreciate everyone's generosity," I said, hand resting on the arm of the chair. "Actually, I called my attorney this morning. I have a few updates." The room went silent for a beat. "Attorney?" Lucas raised an eyebrow. "His name is Thomas Kendrick," I said, "based here in Denver. Specializes in asset management, property law, and trust funds." Jared chuckled. "Ruby, why would you hire an attorney? You don't own anything." I smiled faintly. "Then tomorrow should be very interesting when I present my personal financial report. And incidentally, I'll also be sending some documents to Greystone Development, so they are aware that selling the Kingsley estate is no longer a decision that can be made without input from a new shareholder." "Shareholder?" Uncle Alan snapped. I stood up and adjusted my blazer collar. "Over the past 4 years, I've quietly acquired 18% of Kingsley Capital through 3 separate investment funds. And as of 2 days ago, I secured another 4% from a retiring shareholder." Uncle Alan's face turned pale. Lucas frowned. Brittany froze in place. I now hold 22% of the voting shares, which is enough to block any decisions involving the family's core assets, including this estate. I nodded slightly. Just wanted to give everyone a heads up, because tomorrow, I'll be disclosing my full asset portfolio, including one apartment building where 3 of our family members currently rent. I walked out. Behind me, not a single word was spoken. No applause, no laughter. Just the sound of my footsteps, echoing firmly across the old marble floors of the Kingsley estate. An answer that didn't need to be whispered. Monday, 8:30 a.m. The Denver sky was a cold steel blue, and thin sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Kingsley estate, casting long lines across the oak floor where the official meeting was about to begin. I walked into the main conference room, still wearing the charcoal gray suit. No watch on my wrist, no earrings, just one strand of white pearls that once belonged to Grandma Grace. Uncle Alan sat at the head of the table, surrounded by Jared, Brittany, Lucas, and several major family shareholders. Aunt Lorraine whispered something in his ear, stealing a glance at me. Jared looked at me like I was a lost barista. "Well, looks like we're all here," Uncle Alan announced. "We'll be signing the official agreement to sell the Kingsley estate to Greystone at 10 o'clock. Ruby, if you still wish to object, you may speak, though I hope this time it's brief and realistic." I gave a slight nod. "I won't take long." I placed a black folder on the table, opened it, and slid it to the center. "Before anyone signs anything, I'd like to provide an update. Because the shareholder structure of Kingsley Capital that everyone's using is no longer accurate." I nodded toward the man in a gray suit standing by the door. "My attorney, Thomas Kendrick." He moved quickly, placing documents in front of each person. No one said a word. Not until Jared turned a page showing asset valuations. "Is this a joke?" he snapped, voice louder than usual. "No," I replied. "That's my current asset portfolio. It includes 16 residential properties, 4 commercial buildings, and major shares in 3 active real estate firms in Spokane, Fort Collins, and Missoula. Total valuation, as of now, is over $78 million. I paused. "Including Maple Ridge, the building where Jared, Lucas, and Brittany currently rent." The room fell dead silent. Lucas set his water glass down too hard, spilling it across the tablecloth. "No way," he muttered. "You own Maple Ridge?" I turned to Jared. "Remember that email complaint you sent about the guest check-in system being too strict? I'm the one who approved that policy." Brittany shot up. "This is insane. You've been spying on us?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out another file labeled Grace Foundation Trust. "And this is the second update. Over the past 4 years, I've gradually acquired shares of Kingsley Capital from external partners through 3 holding companies. By last week, I held 18%. I paused again, locking eyes with Uncle Alan. "And last Friday, I officially transferred all my owned assets, including companies and real estate, into a new entity, the Grace Legacy Trust." That same trust finalized a deal to acquire an additional 17% of Kingsley Capital from the Arlington Investor Group. I walked to the projector at the head of the table, plugged in a USB. The screen lit up with a new ownership chart. Grace Legacy Trust. Alan Kingsley, 35%. Alan Kingsley, 32%. The rest split among minor shareholders. As of today, I'm the largest shareholder of Kingsley Capital. No one made a sound. Jared went pale. Lucas looked down, fists clenched. Brittany visibly trembled. Aunt Lorraine looked lost, like someone who'd woken up in a play she didn't understand. And Uncle Alan? He stared at me for a long time. That look no longer held contempt. It shifted to caution and helplessness. "I don't need anyone's agreement," I continued, my voice unwavering. "I just need enough power to stop what's wrong, and selling the estate our grandmother spent her life building? That's one of those things." I closed the laptop. "The Greystone deal is blocked. All decisions about core family assets now require a new vote. And I do not consent. Attorney Kendrick gave a confirming nod. The heritage property sale is now invalid without agreement from the majority shareholder. No one spoke. Until Jessica, the only cousin who never attacked me, slowly began to clap. The sound of her applause cut through the suffocating room like glass. "Brilliant," she murmured, then turned to Jared. "Still want to brag about your portfolio?" I looked around. Every face that had mocked me on Saturday night was now staring at me like I was someone else, someone they hadn't seen coming. I never needed their validation, but now, they'd just handed it to me. And no apology could ever take it back. After the new shareholder structure was announced, the atmosphere at the Kingsley estate shifted so suddenly it felt staged. People who once ignored me became strangely polite. The same ones who used to mock my old focus suddenly remembered I was family. Even the grandchild with Grandma Grace's business sense. That afternoon, Uncle Alan invited me to a private dinner in the wine room, a space previously reserved for valuable negotiations. I politely declined. Aunt Lorraine texted me an invitation to a weekend at the Napa Villa to discuss the company's future, attaching a photo of her wine cellar and a message, "No one knows your potential better than I do, Ruby." I didn't respond. Late that evening, Brittany knocked on my door holding 2 glasses of wine. "I know we've never been close," she said, "but I've always admired you. I just didn't know how to show it." I stared at the wine for a moment before replying gently, "Thanks, but I'm working." I shut the door before she could say more. The next day, Jared waited for me by the back terrace, where Grandma used to plant lavender and place her iron bench facing the pond. "Ruby," he began, "I think we should put the past behind us. We're adults now. I've got some ideas for a riverfront hotel chain. If you're interested in expanding." I cut him off with a slight tilt of my head. "Jared, if I wanted to invest in greed wrapped in family branding, I would have done it at 23. He gave a stiff smile, offering no reply. I wasn't angry. I wasn't gloating. I just saw things clearly. Most of them had never truly seen me as family. They only saw my value once it turned into voting shares or asset figures. I used to be the shadow, now I was the spotlight. Only because they wanted to stand in it. Jessica was the only one who hadn't changed her tune. She sat beside me at Tuesday's breakfast, after the rest of the family had quietly slipped away. "You holding up?" she asked, still in her navy knit cardigan. Those calm brown eyes reminding me not all Kingsleys were the same. "Better than ever," I said, "but tired." She smiled. "You just reorganized an empire without raising your voice, just well-timed silence. And a copy of the deed." She paused. "I think Grandma's smiling." I glanced at the pearl necklace around my neck, feeling something both warm and sharp. Like sunlight spilling across her old wooden table. That afternoon, with Attorney Kendrick, I officially transferred the Kingsley estate from Kingsley Capital's shared assets into Grace Legacy Trust, under a clause preserving its original architecture. The lavender garden, the stone bench, even the kitchen where she used to brew chamomile tea. I wasn't keeping it to live in. I kept it as memory. And the heart of something none of them had dared to build. A scholarship program for young women in real estate, and a financial literacy foundation for women who'd faced bankruptcy. I named it the Hartman Initiative, after my mother's last name, the woman who taught me to read books before I could read numbers. The internal announcement was simple: no press, no cameras, just a small sign at the front gate. This home will live on, not to be sold, but to be passed on. Months later, Jared sent me another proposal. This time, he asked me to serve as the legal guarantor for a loan to expand his failing hotel chain. I didn't reply. "Brittany mailed me a wedding invite, cordially inviting you as an honored guest." I returned it with, "Thank you for the invitation, wishing you happiness. But I no longer do theater." "Jessica?" I invited her to join the advisory board of the Hartman Initiative. She was my first choice, and likely the only one from that family I ever wanted to trust. Because I finally understood, I didn't need to retaliate against anyone. I just needed to live in a way that preserved the values Grandma believed in. Not buried under cheap makeup labeled legacy. I didn't need to be the center, I just needed to be the foundation. Steady, self-owned, and unshakable. 3 months after that fateful meeting, the Kingsley estate wore a new look. Not of fresh paint, but of purpose. The iron gates, once reserved for cars worth 6 figures, now open to those rejected by banks for basic home loans. The sound of luxury leather shoes had been replaced by children's laughter in the backyard, once Grandma's lavender garden. I named it Grace House after the woman who taught me legacy isn't about assets, it's about staying true to your values. In just 2 quarters, Grace House hosted 4 personal finance training courses, 2 business incubators for single mothers starting small real estate ventures, and a statewide conference titled Finance Isn't Just for the Wealthy. I led it all. Not as a CEO. Not on stage. Just as the one signing the checks, approving the budgets, and sitting quietly in a back room during every session. I still live in Spokane, I still drive my 10-year-old Ford Focus, my rented apartment is just over 600 square feet, with an electric stove and a tiny balcony that looks out at a laundromat. People often ask why I haven't moved, why I don't buy a nicer place, why I don't elevate my lifestyle. I just smile. I don't live to prove I'm worthy. When I was younger, I thought winning meant making those who once looked down on me regret it. But now I know. Winning means you no longer care what they think. And still live fully, on your terms. One July afternoon, I returned to Denver for a special anniversary, 50 years since Grandma Grace purchased the Kingsley estate. I hosted the event, but under the name of the Hartman Initiative. My tribute to my mother, the woman who taught me to love books more than spotlights. The guests weren't CEOs or politicians, they were women who had escaped debt thanks to the Grace House program. Women who once couldn't read a lease, now renting out their own first investment properties. When I stepped onto the stage, no flashes went off, no red carpet, no resume read aloud. I stood there, holding a mic, looking out at the garden where Grandma used to water the roses every morning. Someone once told me I didn't belong here, I began. And they were right. I don't belong in a world of flaunted wealth, hollow power and status built on someone else's money. But I do belong in the place where my grandmother read financial papers and reminded me, real wealth is having the power to choose what's right. Even if no one's cheering you on. I paused. We're not here to celebrate a house. We're here to remind each other that legacy isn't what's left behind. It's what we choose to carry forward. After the speech, I returned to my seat. Jessica gently patted my shoulder, her gaze quiet but deep. Grandma's probably sitting up there on the windowsill, she said, watching and smiling. I smiled too. Some family members still keep in touch. Jared sent an email saying he admires the new direction and is always open to collaboration if expansion capital is needed. Brittany offered to host next year's fundraiser, but faded once she realized this wasn't a fashion gala. I'm not angry, I just see clearly now. Some people change to grow closer, others only change their surface. When you have something they want, I don't need them. I have a well-performing portfolio. A genuine partner network across 3 states. A trust fund now run by women who once lived on less than $2,000 a month, now teaching others how to build passive income. And I have one framed photo hanging in the upstairs office of Grace House. Grandma, sitting by the living room window, holding her tea, looking out at the flowers. That's how I remember her, not with titles or power, but with a silence so strong it made people listen even when they didn't want to. I'm no longer the girl placed at the far end of the conference table. And I don't need to sit at the head of it either. I just need to stand firm in my values, to hold what matters. And let those who once judged me by appearances wonder what they missed. I'm Ruby Hartman. And I don't need recognition, I just need the freedom to do what's right. Ruby's story is a powerful reminder that true success doesn't need to be flashy, and a person's worth isn't defined by recognition from family or society. In a world where people are often judged by fame and fortune, Ruby chose a quiet, steady path, not for revenge, but to protect what's right. If you've ever been underestimated just because you're different, remember this. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, as long as you're living in line with what you know is right. What do you think of Ruby's choice? Was she too harsh, or simply defending what was rightfully hers? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more meaningful stories about family and life. I'm Isabella Turner, 29 years old, living alone in a small apartment in Portland. Not spacious, not luxurious, but at least no one knocks on my door at 7 a.m., expecting me to cook breakfast for 6 wild kids running around like caffeinated squirrels. After 8 years of scraping by on an assistant marketing salary, I finally landed a full-time role at a reputable ad agency. My own desk, decent benefits, and, most importantly, a schedule I control. And yet, every time December rolls around, that tight feeling in my throat comes back. I was sitting in my usual coffee shop, halfway through writing copy for a beauty campaign, when my phone buzzed. 12 missed calls. All from my mother, Susan. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. The iced coffee had long gone watery, but I didn't bother ordering another. I knew what she wanted. Same as every year. Come home early, you need to help with the kids. Isabella, you're the only one who can manage them. You don't have kids, so what's wrong with helping your sister a little? When I was a child, Christmas was magical. Lights, gingerbread cookies, and carols playing from that old radio in the kitchen. But after I turned 15, everything changed. I was no longer the kid receiving presents. I became the default babysitter. At first it was for a few hours, then the whole afternoon, then New Year's Eve. By the time I was in college, my mom and sister treated my return home as a given, not to rest but to help. No one asked if I was tired. No one asked if I had plans. They just assigned me tasks. Like I was some pre-programmed nanny designed to smile and soothe tantrums over lost Wi-Fi. I'd tried to push back once. I was 24, and I said I wanted to spend Christmas in New York with friends. My mom was silent for 2 seconds, then sighed like I'd told her she had cancer. You don't really have friends, Isabella, she said flatly. Help your sister. You're their aunt. Don't you love them? That line, "You're their aunt," became the annual spell. I never escaped it. Until now. This year, I finally had a stable job. I wasn't an intern drowning in debt. I could pay rent, bought a used car, and even made plans to spend Christmas in the Colorado mountains with coworkers. A real holiday. No diapers, no screaming, no one asking if I knew how to warm a bottle. I tapped the phone screen. The missed calls still glared red. I didn't want to hear her voice. I was scared. Not because she'd yell, but because she knew how to make me feel guilty. She didn't need to shout. Just one line. You've changed. That was enough to make me drop everything. I slid my phone into my bag, trying to refocus on the draft. But memories crept back. Me at 19, scrubbing pee off the floor from my 4-year-old nephew while in the living room. My sister sipped wine and laughed with my mom and their friends. No one said thank you. No one even asked if I was hungry. I got used to being seen as the one who isn't busy. Because I wasn't married. Because I didn't have kids. Because I seemed available. But in reality, I was busy living. I was busy building a life where I didn't have to sacrifice myself for people who treated the word no as betrayal. The phone rang again. This time it was my sister Jessica. I stared at the screen, didn't answer. I unplugged my headphones and closed the laptop. Snow had started to fall. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. If I didn't protect my boundaries, no one would. This Christmas, I was choosing myself. 2 days later, I got a text from my mom. Isabella, Zoom call at 8 tonight, family meeting to plan Christmas. Just reading the message made my chest tighten. A meeting? Planning what? I had told her clearly last month that I'd be going to Colorado with friends for the holidays. She brushed it off like I was joking. But, at 8 p.m. sharp, I still turned on my computer, partly because I couldn't bring myself to let my grandparents sit through a family Zoom without me. On screen, most of the family was already there. My grandparents sat in the center, warm and sweet in matching red sweaters with snowmen on them. My sister Rachel sat with her husband Mark in their kitchen in Kansas. The chaos of 3 kids screaming in the background over a missing TV remote. My mom joined 1 minute late, lips painted a pale pink, her expression oddly cheerful. "You finally joined," she said, glancing at the clock like I was late for kindergarten. "This'll be quick. Everyone's already agreed." I raised an eyebrow. "Agreed on what, Mom?" Rachel burst out laughing, her voice almost gleeful. "The Bahamas trip." I stayed silent. Mark chimed in. "We booked a 7-day, 6-night package. Leaving the 23rd through the 29th. There's a buffet on the cruise ship, a spa, even sunrise yoga on the deck. It'll be amazing with the whole family." I turned to look at my mom. She smiled sweetly, like honey laced with vinegar. "Your grandparents are going, your dad and I. Rachel and Mark too. Everyone needs a real break after this past year. The issue is, the kids can't go. Cruise rules say children under 10 need a dedicated guardian, and Rachel doesn't want to miss this." My heart started pounding. "So," my mom continued, "we figured you'd stay and watch the little ones. Rachel set everything up. You just need to be in Kansas before the 23rd. You'll have your own room, meals prepped, a full schedule for the kids." I let out a laugh. I couldn't believe this. "Mom," I said slowly, "I already told you. I'm going to Colorado. I booked my plane ticket, reserved a cabin with friends, made plans, back in October. You all know that." Rachel blinked. "You can go to Colorado another time. Christmas only comes once a year." I looked at the screen, at every face staring back, expecting me to nod like it was a given. Did no one think to ask me? Did it not occur to anyone that I might have plans? A life of my own? Mom tilted her head. "Isabella, you've never said no before. You've always been the one who puts family first. That's why we trust you." "No," I said, my voice hoarse with anger. "That's not trust. That's taking advantage." Mark gave an awkward chuckle. "Okay, now you're being dramatic." "No," I repeated, "this isn't the first time. Last year I canceled my Seattle trip because Rachel had a cold. The year before that, I rang in the new year with 2 crying toddlers, while the rest of you partied at a resort." No one answered, just faint Christmas music from the kitchen in the background. "This time, I'm not doing it," I said. "I'm not changing my plans, because you made yours without asking me." My mom took a long breath, then lowered her voice like I was 5 years old. "Isabella, you're being selfish." I stared straight into the camera. "No, selfish is assigning someone a responsibility they didn't agree to. Selfish is planning a vacation and assuming someone else will pick up the slack." "Enough," Rachel snapped, eyes glassy. "The kids love their aunt. You can't abandon them for some pointless trip." I pressed my lips together, holding back what I really wanted to say. If I opened my mouth, I'd say something I couldn't take back. Instead, I turned off the camera. Before I left the call, I said one last thing. "Don't guilt me for refusing to go along with a plan made behind my back. I'm not your live-in babysitter. And this Christmas, I'm choosing myself." The screen went black. I shut my laptop, hand still trembling. No applause. No fireworks. Just snow, falling heavier outside the window. I woke up at 7 a.m. on December 21st with a strange feeling. Part calm, part on edge. I had made it clear during the Zoom call that I wouldn't sacrifice another Christmas. But the night before, I received a text from my mom. Isabella, your grandparents are really hoping to see you tomorrow morning. Just stop by for a bit. The kids miss you too. I hesitated. But I missed my grandparents too. And I still wanted to bring gifts for the kids. Not out of duty, but because I used to be the lonely child in that house. And I didn't want them to feel the way I once did. I drove through a light layer of snow covering the quiet streets of suburban Wichita. My parents' two-story house looked strangely still. No twinkling lights. No Christmas music from the living room like every year. I rang the doorbell. No answer. But the door was unlocked. I stepped inside and called out, "I'm here." No reply. Just the sound of little footsteps on the hardwood floor. A nearby door swung open. Max, my 10-year-old nephew, ran up and hugged my legs, followed by 7-year-old Chloe and 4-year-old Emily, their eyes lighting up. "Aunt Bella!" all three shouted in unison, and I forced a smile. "Hey, sweethearts," I whispered. "Where are your grandparents?" "They went on a trip," Max said casually. "Mom said you're watching us for a few days." I froze. "Went? Where?" "Florida," Chloe cheered. "Mom said she'll FaceTime us every night." I slowly set the gift bag down. In the living room, breakfast had already been laid out. Cereal, milk, toast. On the table sat an envelope labeled, "For Isabella. Thank you for sacrificing for the family." I opened it. Inside was a neatly typed schedule, each line printed in cold uniform font. 7:30 IMF Emily her cough medicine in fridge, yellow label. 9 o'clock, turn on English learning show for Max. 7:30 no beans. Make lunch for Chloe, no beans. 2 o'clock p.m. nap time for all. 5 o'clock, reheat chicken soup in freezer. 7 o'clock bath time. 6:30 story time and bed. Receipt contacts, pediatrician, and trusted neighbor numbers on fridge. At the bottom, in red handwritten ink. "You're the only one we can count on. Help your sister like always. Love, Mom." I stood still. No grandparents, no parents, no one else. They had planned this, left the kids, and tricked me into coming by dangling the idea of family. I stepped into the kitchen. The fridge was packed, every container labeled by day. They had prepared everything, like they were sure I'd show up. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "Thank you, Bella. I knew you'd never leave the kids alone. Merry Christmas." I gripped my phone tightly. What if I hadn't come? Would they have really left these kids alone? Or had they just gambled on the idea that I'd never say no? I didn't know what made me angrier. The outright deception? Or their smug confidence that I'd just go along with it, like always? Emily tugged at my shirt. "Auntie, can you read us a story?" I knelt down and nodded gently. "Yes. But first, I need to make a phone call." I walked back into the kitchen, locked the door, pulled out my phone and dialed. My hands trembled, part rage, part heartbreak that, once again, my Christmas had been stolen. After 2 rings, the line picked up. My mom's voice was cheerful, like she was lounging on a Miami beach. "Isabella, you made it. Are the kids okay?" "Not okay," I said, voice steady and cold. "What did you and Rachel just pull?" "I knew you'd come. I believe in you. You're always the one who puts family first." "No. You believe I'm too kind to say no. You didn't think I'd react. But this time is different. Don't make a big deal out of this, Isabella. I'm taking care of 3 minors while every adult in this family flew off without giving official notice. That's child abandonment. You know that's a crime in the state of Kansas, right?" The other end went silent. I continued. "You have 1 hour to come back. If not, I'm calling child services and the police." "You wouldn't actually do that." "I'm completely serious." I hung up, my heart raced, hands clenched. I didn't know if they'd really come back. But for the first time, I knew I was reclaiming control. I was no longer the obedient puppet they could guilt into anything with a few words about family. I returned to the living room, smiling at the 3 kids waiting for me, with a Christmas storybook. "How about one story before we play a word game?" "Yeah!" they shouted in unison, unaware that I had just declared a quiet war. Not against them, but to finally save myself. I checked the clock. 8:46. I had given Mom 1 hour. That meant they had 14 minutes left. In the meantime, I tried to stay calm by tidying up the perfectly prepared kitchen. Everything was clean and arranged, to the point of being emotionless, like the house was a stage, and I, an uninvited audience member, had been forced into a role I never agreed to play. The kids were playing in the living room. Emily was stacking blocks by the Christmas tree, Chloe was reading on the sofa, Max was sprawled out on the rug, glued to his iPad, oblivious to the fact that no adult over 30 was within a 200-mile radius. I took out my phone and photographed everything. The absence of adults, the notes on the table, the unsupervised children. Then I filmed the entire house. Date and time clearly visible on screen. Not because I wanted to take things too far. But this time, I wasn't giving them a chance to deny or twist the truth like every other year. 9:01. No calls, no texts. I didn't say anything to the kids. I just went upstairs to the guest room, which Rachel usually used as her home office. The door was unlocked. Her laptop, printer and mini fax machine were still on the desk. There was even a file cabinet. I turned on the laptop. No password. I opened Rachel's email, ignoring personal stuff, and searched for flight details. Just as I suspected, plane tickets to Miami, dated December 25, 6:35 a.m. That meant by the time I had woken up, they were already comfortably seated on the plane. There was also a car rental agreement on the desk, under my dad's name. George Turner, confirming pickup at Miami International Airport at 9:15 a.m. They didn't just leave on impulse. They planned it in advance, down to the minute. That text last night? Just bait. I sat in the chair. My rage was no longer boiling. It had gone cold and quiet, like a slab of ice in my chest. I wasn't sad or shocked anymore. Just clear-eyed about something I had quietly known for years. I had never truly been part of this family. I was just convenient. I pulled out my phone and called the Kansas Child Protective Services hotline. A woman answered. Polite and efficient, I spoke clearly without stammering. "My name is Isabella Turner. I'm currently at 1459 West Auburn Street in Wichita. There are 3 minors left alone in this house without supervision. Their parents left the state without designating any legal guardian. I did not agree to take care of them. I have evidence." She asked for details. I gave everything. Names, timestamps, flight number, photos, videos, booking confirmation emails. She listened carefully without judgment. "Ms. Turner, we'll forward this case to a Wichita field officer. Someone will be in touch with you within 30 minutes. I hung up, still staring at the screen. No texts, no apology, no explanation. 9:18. Finally, the sound of a car outside. I peeked through the curtain. Not CPS. It was my father. I hurried to the door and flung it open before he could ring the bell. He wore a blue travel jacket, dark circles under his eyes, hair matted with sweat. "Isabella," he panted, "don't call the police, we can talk this out." "I already did," I said, strangely calm. "They're on their way." "You can't do this, this is your family." "That's exactly why," I cut him off. "Because you're my family, I won't accept being tricked and treated like a free babysitter." I said no. You all ignored me. My mother ran from the car, her face pale. "Sweetheart, calm down. We didn't think it would get this serious." "No," I interrupted again. "You just didn't want to think. You counted on my silence." "But the kids," she tried. "The kids are innocent, but I won't keep erasing myself just because someone throws out the phrase, "for the kids." The back car door opened. Rachel stepped out, eyes red. She looked at me but said nothing. In her hand was her phone, probably showing a CPS alert. 15 minutes later, a silver SUV pulled up to the curb. Two casually dressed officers stepped out, showed their IDs, and began asking questions. I provided all the evidence. My parents were stunned. Rachel was silent, her face turned ghost white when the officer said, "Leaving the state and abandoning minors without legal guardianship, even with relatives, can be considered a criminal offense in Kansas." I said nothing more, just stood there, gripping my coat, hollow inside. I didn't feel joy watching them panic. I didn't feel triumphant seeing them cornered. I just felt tired. I spent the rest of the morning in silence. After the child protection officers left, my entire family quietly packed their bags and returned the space they had invaded, not by force, but by default. My mother avoided eye contact, and Rachel could only manage one sentence. "You really went too far." I didn't reply, I was too exhausted to argue. That afternoon, I returned to my apartment in Portland. Snow still dusted the rooftops, and inside was the quiet calm I had always longed for during the holidays. I made myself a bowl of chicken soup, turned on the heater, curled up with my old fleece blanket, and allowed myself to rest. No checking my phone, no replying to messages, no explaining. But the silence didn't last. The next day around noon, I got a call from my best friend, Olivia. "Have you seen your mom's post?" I sat up, heart pounding. "What post?" "Oh, on Facebook. I'll send you the link." I opened my phone, hands beginning to shake, as I read the long status posted by my mother, Susan Turner. "Christmas is a time for love and togetherness, but not everyone understands that. Even after we tried to plan a beautiful family vacation, we were betrayed by someone we always trusted. The kids cried all day. It's heartbreaking how selfishness can ruin a cherished tradition." Below was a photo of the three children looking glum in the living room, captioned, "Always love our children, even when others don't understand the value of family." The picture was from the house in Wichita. I recognized the red pillow behind Max. I had bought it last year. I froze. Not a single line mentioned how I was tricked. Not a word about them leaving the state without consent. They twisted the entire situation, painting me as the villain. The comments started rolling in. "Ungrateful daughters these days. Stay strong, Susan, you did the right thing." It's sad how people abandon family values for so-called freedom. It was just one trip, she couldn't watch the kids for a few days? My chest ached. Not because of the judgment, but because I had been right. They weren't sorry. They were just annoyed they got exposed. I opened my laptop, logged into Facebook. Typed, deleted, typed again, deleted again. Until I finally wrote exactly what needed to be said. Not angry, not defensive. Just the truth. "My name is Isabella Turner. Yesterday, I was called to my sister's house to drop off Christmas presents for my nieces and nephew. When I arrived, I discovered that the entire family, my parents, sister, and brother-in-law, had left the state and abandoned 3 minor children without a legal guardian. They had planned everything in advance, meals, schedule, without asking me. I did not agree to babysit. They just assumed I was too kind to say no. When I threatened to report it to Child Services, they rushed back. Today, I found out my mother posted a misleading Facebook post to distort the facts. I will not stay silent. Here is photo evidence of the flight schedule, the handwritten note, and the instructions left behind. I don't want anyone to feel they have to choose between honesty and loyalty. Family isn't the only place to find love. A true family's built on mutual respect, not obligation. I'm not posting this out of revenge. I'm posting to reclaim my voice. I hit p. At first, there were just a few likes. Then Olivia shared it. Then a few old college friends. Within 3 hours, the post had over 2,000 shares. I started getting messages from strangers. Your story is exactly what happened to me 10 years ago. Thank you for speaking what so many of us are afraid to. You're not selfish. You're protecting yourself. I sat in front of my screen, reading each line. The loneliness inside me softened. That evening, I got a message from my grandfather. "Can you call me, sweetheart?" I called right away. His voice was warm and steady. "I saw everything. I believe you. And I think it's time the adults in this family apologized." I didn't say anything. I just listened. And, for the first time in years, I didn't feel wrong for speaking up. Then my phone buzzed again, a notification. My mother had just posted a new status. I tapped it. The headline read, "A public apology from a mother who went too far." My phone rang at 7 a.m. the next morning. It was my grandmother. Barbara, 73, a retired elementary school teacher, and the only one in my family who listened instead of judged. "Isabella," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This is no longer a family misunderstanding. This is prolonged abuse of your trust. And now that they've begun smearing you publicly, I think you need to protect yourself legally." I stayed silent, not interrupting. She had never pushed me to take drastic action. But this time, her tone was resolute. "Your grandfather and I are on your side. We're not letting this pass like before." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Yes, Grandma, I understand." Less than 2 hours later, I found a law firm in Portland that specialized in defamation and harassment within families. I told the whole story to the attorney. Her name was Claire Donnelly, around 40. Sharp, calm-spoken, and appropriately empathetic. When I handed over screenshots of social media posts, the comments from my mom, Rachel, even my dad, who wrote that I was mentally unstable and just seeking attention, Claire frowned. "Miss Turner, this goes far beyond a family dispute," she said. "This is emotional harassment, and the public statements may legally qualify as defamation. You have solid grounds to issue a cease and desist letter and to go further if necessary." I asked, "Do you think I should sue?" Claire tilted her head slightly. "The first step is a formal warning letter. If they persist, I'll help you file a lawsuit." We started that same day. Claire drafted a clear letter outlining the specific actions of my mom, dad, and sister, demanding they take down the defamatory posts and issue a public apology within 72 hours. If not, we'd proceed with legal action. I didn't want things to escalate. But I also couldn't continue allowing myself to be humiliated just because I refused to stay silent. 3 days later, instead of apologizing, my mother posted a new status. "It's heartbreaking when your own flesh and blood chooses to threaten the family with lawyers. We just wanted to protect the kids and preserve a cherished Christmas tradition, and now we're accused of abandonment and abuse. I truly don't understand what this generation thinks family means anymore." Below were the usual comments. "Kids these days are so ungrateful." The HG Drylon Susan. "You did the right thing. So sad to see people choosing lawsuits over loyalty. Can't even watch your niece and nephew for a holiday trip?" This time, Rachel shared the post too, adding, "Everyone has limits, even family." I didn't feel shocked anymore. I felt sorry. Sorry for a family so determined to preserve their perfect image, they trampled one of their own to keep it intact. Claire immediately sent a second letter. This time a final notice, warning that if the attacks continued, we would file a formal defamation and harassment lawsuit. It didn't stop there. My dad, who had previously kept a neutral stance, suddenly posted a short video. He sat in their backyard, looking somber, saying, "My daughter has been influenced by outsiders and is losing her loving heart." The video quickly spread on Facebook, TikTok, and even got shared by several large accounts with captions like, "When the younger generation forgets what parents sacrificed." I started receiving floods of messages. some threatening, most condemning. Strangers sent anonymous emails, calling me a thankless monster, and saying I was the kind of person who'll die alone. I couldn't focus at work. Every time I opened my phone, another wave of negativity hit me. I locked down my Facebook, hid all personal info, and even filed for temporary leave at work due to mental health stress. I called my grandfather. "You did the right thing," he said gently. "Don't let so-called family reputation overshadow the truth. If they're building a wall of lies, you have the right to tear it down." I cried. Not from weakness, but from the relief of knowing at least someone still believed me. 3 days later, Claire filed the official lawsuit. We submitted it to the local court. Clear allegations, solid evidence, a list of defamatory statements, timestamps, and screenshots of how far they spread. I knew there was no turning back after this step. My family had chosen to attack instead of talk, and I, Isabella Turner, had chosen to defend myself, even if it meant facing hatred from people who once called me daughter, little sister, Aunt Bella. The real battle had only just begun. The first court hearing took place in mid-March at the Sedgwick County Courthouse in Kansas. That day was bitterly cold with patches of melting snow along the curbs. I wore a charcoal gray long coat and sat silently in the waiting room beside my attorney, Claire Donnelly. Across the room, my parents and Rachel sat in a row, their faces stiff like stone. No one looked at me, and I made no attempt to engage. I was no longer seeking reconciliation. I was here to reclaim the truth. Their attorney, a silver-haired middle-aged man named Walter Burns, opened with a highly emotional speech about a family torn apart by misunderstandings, and the sorrow of parents being taken to court by their own daughter over a few Facebook posts. He called it a modern social tragedy. Claire didn't react. She let him speak, then calmly stood and presented over 300 pages of documentation. Screenshots, texts, videos, emails, and public posts from my mom, dad, and Rachel. Every word, every timestamp laid bare. She opened her laptop and played the video my dad had posted, him sitting in the garden, lamenting that I had been influenced by outsiders and had forgotten filial piety. Background music had been added, making it feel more like a manipulative propaganda piece than a heartfelt message. Claire looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, these actions are no longer within the realm of private family disputes. This is a deliberate smear campaign, made public, and has caused serious damage to my client's mental health, reputation, and social well-being. We're not seeking revenge, we are seeking justice." For the entire 4-hour hearing, I remained silent. Only when the judge invited me to speak did I rise. My voice was steady, not shaky. I used to think that if I stayed quiet things would settle on their own, but my silence was mistaken for consent. I don't regret speaking out, even if it costs me permanent estrangement from my own blood relatives. When I finished, the courtroom fell silent. Rachel lowered her head. My mother turned away slightly, as if she couldn't bear to face the reflection of her own actions in my words. 3 weeks later, the court issued its verdict. The judge found that the actions of Susan Turner, George Turner, and Rachel Howard constituted a pattern of harassment, defamation of personal character, and prolonged emotional harm. 3 rulings were made. A 2-year no-contact order prohibiting any direct, indirect, or social media-based communication with me in any form. Compensation for emotional distress, totaling $75,000, covering therapy costs, lost income due to work leave, and legal expenses. A mandatory takedown of all defamatory content, and the requirement to post a written public apology within 14 days, to remain visible for a minimum of 6 months, on the platforms where false claims had been published. No one from their side objected in court. They knew they had lost. Not because I was more powerful, but because they were too confident that I would always stay silent. I left the courthouse in silence. On the way home, Claire said to me, "Not everyone has the courage to sue the very people who raised them, but not everyone has the right to destroy their child under the title of parent. 7 days later, my mother posted her apology on Facebook, cold, brief, emotionless. Rachel sent a private email apology, blaming pressure and a lapse in judgment. My father said nothing. But the consequences didn't stop there. My father, once a regional director at a logistics company, was asked to take early retirement after his video went viral on LinkedIn and was deemed inconsistent with corporate ethical standards. My mother, previously an active member of the PTA and local charity boards, was removed from her board position after the community demanded answers regarding her use of social media to attack her daughter. Rachel and her husband, owners of a small family-run bakery, faced a wave of backlash. A local blog covering my lawsuit gained traction, and their customer base vanished. Within 4 months, they were forced to sell the shop at nearly a 40% loss. My family, once proudly held up as a model household in the community, now lived quietly and out of the spotlight. The travel posts, photos of matching outfits for the grandkids, moral lectures, all vanished from social media. What remained was a heavy silence. I didn't rejoice in what they lost, but I knew that if I hadn't stood up, everything would have repeated itself, year after year. An endless cycle of manipulation and lies, disguised by the word family. I cut all contact with my parents and Rachel right after the trial. No texts, no calls. The no-contact order was initially set for 2 years, but for me, it marked the beginning of something deeper. A decision never to let them back into my life again. Ever. I stayed in touch with my grandparents. Every Sunday I'd video call Grandma Barbara to hear her stories about her years as an elementary school teacher. Grandpa Frank would often send handwritten letters, his shaky handwriting warm and steady, always ending with the same line. "You did the right thing, Isabella." As for the kids, Max, Chloe, and Emily, I kept in touch indirectly through my grandparents. I didn't want them to have to take sides, or be dragged into the mess adults created. But I always told Grandma, if the kids ever need me, I'll be here. Then the years went by. I transferred to a new job in Seattle and took on a creative lead position at a major media firm. Every morning I had my coffee at the usual cafe near work, clocked in on time, and no longer flinched at the sound of my phone ringing from people who used to treat me like the family's on-call babysitter. People called me by my name. Isabella Turner, not Mommy's good girl, or the youngest who should be more understanding. 3 years after the trial, I met David. A soft-spoken architect from Oregon, 2 years older than me, with a kind smile and eyes that never saw me as an obligation. We started with simple dates, pizza on the balcony, walks in the park, reading sci. I didn't share my whole story right away, but when I did mention that I'd once had to choose between truth and family, he gently held my hand and said, "You chose right, not everyone is brave enough to do that." At 34, I got married. It was a small, cozy wedding, just close friends, my grandparents, and a few colleagues. No one from my parents' side was invited, and we didn't need them. 9 months later, I gave birth to our first daughter, Sophie. In the quiet hospital room on an early autumn morning, holding her in my arms, I made a silent promise. I'll never let anyone use the word family to hurt you. When Sophie turned 3, I started a blog about surviving toxic family dynamics. I didn't name anyone or go into legal details, but I wrote about the feeling of being used as a tool. About the emotional tug-of-war between staying silent and seeking justice. The blog went viral. Many reached out, mostly middle-aged women, sharing similar stories. Being manipulated by their parents, treated as backup, labeled as ungrateful, simply for wanting to live life their own way. I wasn't alone anymore, and I knew I had done the right thing. Not just for myself, but for those learning how to break free from the trap disguised as familial love. When Max turned 18, he contacted me via email. His first line was, "Aunt Bella, I'm sorry. I didn't know what the adults did to you. I sat in front of my screen for a long time before replying with one sentence. You kids were never to blame. I've always been here. A month later, Max came to Seattle. Now a tall young man studying psychology, he hugged me tightly outside my apartment. We spent the afternoon talking about childhood memories, what I'd been through, and about Sophie, the little girl I once feared would grow up in doubt and pain, but who instead became the light that guided me out of the dark. Soon after, Chloe and Emily reached out too. They didn't resent their parents. They just wanted the truth. And I told them. Not bitterly, not angrily, just with the honesty I never received from my own family. This year, I turned 38. I live in a small house in the suburbs of Seattle. I grow vegetables in the backyard, bake during the holidays, and take Sophie to her piano class with David every Wednesday afternoon. I still work in the creative field, but I no longer let others' validation define my worth. After everything, I've learned this. Not every blood tie makes a true family. Real family is where there's kindness, respect, and freedom. I was once left behind on Christmas Eve, without a second thought. But now, every Christmas, I'm the one who decides who gets to enter my home. And I choose love. But never again at the cost of myself. Isabella's story is proof that kindness doesn't mean you have to stay silent. When family becomes a source of harm instead of a place of comfort, setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Saying no, demanding truth and justice. These weren't just ways Isabella protected herself, but a powerful message to anyone who's ever been exploited in the name of love. You deserve respect, even if it means walking away alone. What do you think about Isabella's journey? What would you do if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, heartfelt stories about family and life.